Hey, curious minds. In a world full of secrets and shadows, every question leads to another mystery. Let's explore what lies beneath the surface. Today, we're turning our attention to a geographical puzzle that has, well, captivated imaginations for decades. The Bermuda Triangle, also known by that more ominous name, the Devil's Triangle.
Right. And, this isn't some tiny, obscure patch of water. We're talking about a really significant area.
How big are we talking?
Roughly 440,000 square miles in the Atlantic. Basically, the area between Bermuda, Florida, and Puerto Rico.
Wow, that's vast.
It is. And what's interesting is despite this whole air of mystery, it's actually a very busy shipping route. Loads of vessels pass through there every day.
And it's within this really heavily trafficked area that this narrative of unexplained disappearances has built up over centuries.
Yeah, ships, planes, thousands of people seemingly just vanishing without a trace.
The name itself, Bermuda Triangle, that only really became common parlance in, the 60s.
1964, yeah. Vincent Gaddis wrote an article. But the feeling that something weird is going on there, that goes way back.
How far back?
Well, people point to Christopher Columbus even. On his first voyage, he apparently wrote about seeing a strange flame crashing into the sea, right in that area.
Huh. Interesting. But it really took off in the 20th century, didn't it?
Oh, definitely. I think the disappearance of the USS Cyclops in 1918 was a huge moment.
Right, that massive Navy ship.
Exactly. Over 300 people aboard vanished. That really made people sit up and wonder, what could make such a huge vessel just disappear?
And it hasn't stopped. These aren't just old legends.
Not at all. Just back in May 2021, there was that small twin-engine plane. 4 people, it vanished flying from Puerto Rico to Florida. They did find some debris later, but still.
And that cargo ship in 2015, during the hurricane.
El Faro, yeah. Lost within the triangle's boundaries during Hurricane Joaquin. Tragic.
Okay, so let's really dig into this. What lies beneath the surface of these disappearances? That's what we want to explore today. We need to look at the theories, the big ones, the compelling ones, from the frankly bizarre to the more scientific. And the evidence, or maybe more often, the lack of evidence.
And there's such a spectrum, isn't there? You've got everything from, paranormal activity, aliens even.
Yeah, that stuff always grabs headlines.
It does, but then you have the attempts to explain it using science, using natural phenomena.
Right. Let's start there. What about the magnetic field theory? The idea that compasses go crazy.
Okay, so the theory is that there's unusual electromagnetic interference in the triangle, messes up compasses, leads to navigational errors.
Makes sense on the surface.
Sort of. I mean, yes, the Earth's magnetic field does shift constantly. That affects compass readers everywhere over time. Agonic lines, true north versus magnetic north, all that.
But the triangle isn't special in that way.
Well, the data doesn't really show it was ever uniquely a place where compasses pointed exactly to true north, which is what some versions of the theory claimed. Magnetic variations exist, sure, but the triangle doesn't seem exceptionally anomalous compared to other places globally.
Okay. What about the Atlantis connection? I've definitely heard that one powerful energy crystal is messing things up.
Ah, yes, Atlantis.
Yeah.
It's a very popular theory in, let's say, fringe circles. The idea of leftover energy crystals interfering with navigation.
But the evidence.
It's shaky at best. The main proof people point to is the Bimini Road, those underwater rock formations.
Right, looks a bit like paving stones.
Exactly. But geologists are pretty much agreed now that it's a natural formation, not man-made, certainly not part of Atlantis. So yeah, the physical evidence just isn't there.
Then you get the even wilder stuff, like that rumor about a secret U.S. base, Tech, testing alien tech.
Right, the Atlantic Undersea Test and Evaluation Center. It is real, it's in the Bahamas, so technically within the wider triangle area.
But the alien tech part?
Pure speculation. There's absolutely no credible evidence for that. It's just a rumor that got attached to the mystery.
And those personal accounts, like Bruce Gernon, the pilot who flew through some weird cloud tunnel. Electronic fog, he called it.
Yeah, his story is certainly dramatic. Flying over the Bahamas, encounters this bizarre cloud formation, experiences time distortion, electronic malfunctions. It's a fascinating anecdote.
But hard to verify.
Exactly. It's one person's experience. It doesn't really offer a universal explanation for all the different disappearances over the years.
Okay. Any other slightly out there ones? A comet.
There's a theory that maybe a comet struck the area thousands of years ago, fundamentally altering its electromagnetic properties.
Interesting idea. Any proof?
Again, it's speculative. There's no direct geological evidence linking a specific comet impact to the ongoing phenomena reported in the triangle.
Right. Okay, let's shift to theories with maybe a bit more scientific grounding. The trapped methane gas one. That sounds plausible.
It does. This is one of the more widely discussed scientific possibilities. The seabed in parts of the region contains methane hydrates, basically frozen methane.
And if that gets released?
If an underwater tremor or landslide disturbs these deposits, you could get a massive, sudden release of methane gas bubbles rising through the water.
Which would affect ships.
Dramatically. It would rapidly decrease the density of the water. So a ship floating on top could suddenly lose buoyancy and sink incredibly quickly, almost without warning.
Wow. And planes.
Potentially. If a huge amount of methane reached the surface and mixed with air, some scientists suggest it could stall engines or even ignite, posing a threat to low-flying aircraft.
Okay, that sounds like a solid explanation for some incidents.
It does. But there's a catch.
Which is?
These methane hydrate deposits aren't unique to the Bermuda Triangle. They exist in many ocean regions around the world.
Ah. So why would the triangle be special?
Exactly. While it's a valid mechanism for how a ship could sink suddenly, it doesn't explain why the triangle specifically would have more of these incidents, if indeed it does. The lack of unique methane activity kind of weakens it as the single answer.
Okay, now there's a newer theory I read about. Hexagonal clouds. Air bombs. That sounds pretty dramatic.
Yeah, this one's gained traction more recently, based on satellite meteorology. Scientists looking at radar satellite images observed these unusual clouds with straight, hexagonal edges over the Bahamas.
Hexagonal. Like a honeycomb.
Pretty much, really distinct shapes, anywhere from 20 to 55 miles across, and the theory is that these clouds can generate incredibly powerful downdrafts, microbursts.
Like sudden blasts of air straight down.
Exactly, they're calling them air bombs. Wind speeds could potentially hit like 170 miles per hour.
Whoa. That would be enough.
Absolutely. Enough to swamp a ship or cause a plane to lose control and crash. And intriguingly, similar hexagonal clouds linked to high winds have been seen elsewhere, like the North Sea.
So there's some corroborating evidence for the phenomenon itself.
There is. It offers a potential meteorological explanation grounded in observable data, which makes it quite compelling for explaining sudden, violent losses.
So we've got this whole range of theories, from aliens to air bombs. But maybe we should look at some of the classic stories associated with the triangle. Do they hold up under scrutiny? Let's start with the Mary Celeste. That's the ultimate ghost ship story, isn't it?
It really is. Found adrift back in 1872. Now, technically, it wasn't found in the triangle, but it gets looped into the lore all the time.
And the mystery is, the ship was fine.
Remarkably so. Sails partly set, cargo mostly intact, though some barrels of alcohol were empty, personal belongings still there. But Captain Briggs, his wife, his daughter, the whole crew vanished. The lifeboat was also missing.
And no sign of violence. Pirates were ruled out.
Yeah, no struggle. So the big question remains, why would an experienced crew abandon a perfectly seaworthy ship, apparently in decent weather?
Theories abound, I assume.
Oh, endlessly. Everything from mutiny, insurance fraud, fumes from the alcohol cargo causing temporary insanity, giant squid attack, alien abduction, you name it. A sudden storm or waterspout, perhaps? None quite fit all the facts. It's just enduringly mysterious.
Okay, what about the Ellen Austin? The ship that supposedly found another ghost ship.
Right. The story goes that in 1881, the Ellen Austin came across a derelict schooner near the Triangle. No crew, but the cargo was fine.
So they decided to claim it.
Exactly. The captain put a prize crew on board to sail it alongside the Ellen Austin, but then a squall separated them.
And the derelict vanished.
Poof. Gone. And the creepiest part of the story is that later, the Ellen Austin supposedly sighted the derelict again, still sailing aimlessly and again completely empty. Some versions even say they put another prize crew on and it vanished again.
That is seriously spooky. True.
Well, here's where it gets tricky. Larry Kush, that researcher we mentioned.
Investigator.
Yeah. He dug deep into this one, and he found basically no contemporary records, no newspaper reports, no shipping logs confirming this specific event happened as described in 1881.
So where did the story come from?
He traced it back to much later accounts, like a book from 1943 and a newspaper story from 1906 that placed it in 1891 but didn't cite any sources. The ship Ellen Austin did exist, but there's no official record of this dramatic encounter or loss of prize crews.
So likely a legend that grew over time.
It seems very likely, yeah. A great story, but probably not factual history.
It really shows how these things can get embellished. Okay, let's talk about a definite tragic loss. The USS Cyclops. That one is undisputed.
Absolutely. March 1918, World War I. A huge U.S. Navy collier ship over 500 feet long, carrying manganese ore from Brazil to Baltimore. over 300 souls on board.
And it just disappeared somewhere in the triangle.
Completely. No SOS, no radio contact, nothing. Vanished without a trace. An extensive search found absolutely zero wreckage.
What were the theories back then? German U-boat?
That was considered, given the war. But Germany denied it, and later checks of records showed no U-boats were likely in that specific area at that time.
So, other ideas.
Plenty of speculation. Some focused on the captain, Worley, who apparently had some German ties and a bit of a reputation. Others suggested structural failure. Maybe the ship broke apart, possibly due to the heavy cargo shifting in rough seas. Or maybe it encountered a rogue wave near the deep Puerto Rico Trench.
But no definitive cause.
None. The U.S. Navy itself officially called it one of the sea's baffling mysteries. A huge modern ship just gone.
Then there's the Carol A. Deering, another ghost ship found aground.
Yeah, this was a big schooner found hard aground off Cape Hatteras, North Carolina in January 1921. Again, slightly outside the typical triangle boundaries, but often linked.
And the crew?
Gone. Completely deserted. Personal belongings, the ship's logbooks, navigational gear, life rafts, all missing. Food was apparently laid out in the galley like they left suddenly.
Strange. Rum running was suspected, right? Prohibition era.
That was definitely one theory. Mutiny, piracy. It coincided with other ship disappearances in the area, too, which added to the mystery. Became known as the ghost ship of the Outer Banks.
Okay, one more specific case, the witchcraft. This one seems particularly weird because it happened so close to shore.
It really is baffling. December 1967, a cabin cruiser named Witchcraft leaves Miami Marina. Just the owner, Dan Burak, and a friend, Father Patrick Horgan. They were just going out a mile or so to see the Christmas lights along the shore.
Okay, a short trip.
Very short. Then Burak radios the Coast Guard, says he hit something underwater, maybe a reef or debris, damaged his propeller. But he specifically said there was no major damage, no danger of sinking, he just needed a tow.
So the Coast Guard heads out.
Immediately. They were only a mile offshore near buoy number 7. The Coast Guard cutter reached that exact spot in just 19 minutes.
Oh.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The Witchcraft was gone.
Vanished in 19 minutes. A boat known for being sturdy, unsinkable even.
Exactly. It had flotation devices, flares, life jackets, standard safety gear. None of it was found. An extensive search turned up zero trace of the boat or the 2 men, just vanished from a calm sea a mile from Miami.
That one is hard to explain away easily.
It really is. It feeds directly into that idea that something truly strange and inexplicable can happen very suddenly in that region.
Right. So we have these stories, some perhaps more legend than fact, others genuinely puzzling. But this brings us around to the counter-argument, doesn't it? The perspective that says there's actually no great mystery here at all.
Exactly. This is a really important perspective put forward by people like Dr. Carl Kryszelnicki and others.
And their argument is basically, it's just normal stuff happening in a busy area.
Pretty much. They argue that when you factor in human error, which causes the vast majority of accidents everywhere.
Pilot error, navigational mistakes.
Right. Then add the notoriously bad weather the area can experience. It's in Hurricane Alley. You get sudden violent thunderstorms, colliding air masses, the strong currents of the Gulf Stream. And then combine that with the sheer volume of traffic. Lots of planes, lots of ships, lots of pleasure craft.
Statistically, you're just going to have more accidents.
Precisely. Kryszelnicki argues the number of disappearances, when calculated as a percentage of the total traffic, isn't actually higher in the Bermuda Triangle than in any other similarly busy patch of ocean.
Have the insurers looked at this? Like Lloyd's of London. Do they charge higher premiums?
That's a key point. According to sources like Norman Hook, a former historian for Lloyd's Maritime Information Services, no, they don't. Insurers base premiums on statistical risk, and the data apparently doesn't show the triangle is significantly riskier than other comparable sea lanes. The U.S. Coast Guard has also echoed this sentiment.
So the perception of extreme danger might be inflated.
That's the argument. It's more about perception and storytelling than statistical reality.
What about Flight 19 then? That's often cited as the definitive, inexplicable triangle event. 5 Navy planes vanishing, plus a search plane.
Yeah, Flight 19 is iconic, but the no mystery proponents point to several factors. First, the weather wasn't great that day. Reports mention high winds and waves up to 15 meters.
Okay, challenging conditions.
Second, the flight leader, Lieutenant Taylor, though experienced, apparently had gotten lost on previous flights, might have been flying without a watch that day, and some reports even suggest he might have been hungover.
Not ideal.
Radio communications indicate he became very disoriented. He thought his compasses were broken and that they were over the Florida Keys when they were actually much further east over the Bahamas.
And he made a bad call.
It seems so. Some junior pilots apparently suggested flying west towards the setting sun, which would have taken them to Florida. But Taylor insisted they fly east, convinced that was the way to land, taking them further out over the open Atlantic.
A fatal error in judgment, possibly compounded by compass issues or disorientation.
Likely. And the search plane, the PBM Mariner that supposedly vanished looking for them? Well, it wasn't quite a vanishing act. There were eyewitness reports from a ship, the SS Gaines Mills, of seeing a mid-air explosion around the time and place the Mariner disappeared. An oil slick and debris were found later.
An explosion.
Yes, and those PBM Mariner planes had a known nickname, flying gas tanks. They had a reputation for being prone to fuel vapor explosions. The Navy even grounded them temporarily after other incidents. So a catastrophic mechanical failure seems a much more likely explanation than some mysterious force.
Okay, so when you piece together those details, Flight 19 sounds less like a paranormal event and more like a tragic sequence of errors and misfortune.
That's certainly the interpretation offered by researchers like Kusha and Krysolnicki. Larry Kusha's book from 1975, The Bermuda Triangle Mystery Solved, was really groundbreaking in this regard.
What did he find?
He meticulously went back through official records, newspaper archives, eyewitness accounts for dozens of reported triangle incidents. He found many were reported inaccurately, some didn't even happen within the triangle, and for others, plausible explanations involving weather or human error existed, but were often ignored in the more sensational retellings.
So poor research by earlier writers. Sensationalism.
A lot of it, yes. He concluded there was no evidence the disappearance rate was abnormally high, and that much of the mystery was manufactured through sloppy research and a desire to tell a dramatic story.
Which leads us directly to the role the media has played in all this.
Hugely significant. You can't talk about the Bermuda Triangle without acknowledging how media news reports, documentaries, books, magazine articles has shaped the whole narrative.
Focusing on the spooky stuff.
Often, yes. The tendency is often to emphasize the unexplained, the speculative theories, the dramatic potential. It makes for a better story, right? More clicks, more viewers, more book sales.
Then just saying probable cause, bad weather, and pilot error.
Exactly. So you get this kind of feedback loop. An incident happens, it gets reported, maybe with some mysterious details emphasized. Books and articles pick it up, perhaps adding more speculation. Documentaries dramatize it.
And the public gets fascinated.
Which drives demand for more media coverage, which further reinforces the idea of the triangle as this uniquely dangerous, mysterious place. It's almost a textbook example of how media can construct and perpetuate a modern myth.
Like media technological determinism theory in action. The medium shaping the message and public perception.
You could certainly argue that. And critics have pointed out that many popular books on the topic really push sensationalism and conspiracy over careful, factual analysis.
So the advice is, be critical. Look for the evidence behind the headlines.
Absolutely. Media outlets ideally should try to balance the entertainment value with factual reporting and input from actual experts in meteorology, aviation, maritime history, and so on. But the allure of the mystery is strong.
Okay, so wrapping this up, we're left with these two kind of opposing views, aren't we?
Yeah, on one side you have the persistent idea of a genuine mystery. A place where unexplained forces might be at work, supported by a collection of baffling incidents and fueled by theories ranging from methane gas to hexagonal clouds, maybe even stranger things.
And on the other side.
The more skeptical view. That it's largely a phenomenon created by combining normal accidents in a busy, sometimes hazardous area with human error, and then amplifying it all through decades of sensationalized media coverage. That statistically, it's not really anomalous.
But even with the scientific explanations, some incidents, like the witchcraft or the Cyclops, still feel unresolved.
They do. While science can explain the mechanisms by which ships and planes can be lost at sea, definitive proof of what happened in every specific historical case is often impossible to find. That lack of closure leaves room for the mystery to persist.
So despite all the debunking efforts, the Bermuda Triangle still holds this powerful fascination for us.
Absolutely. Maybe it's just human nature to be drawn to the unknown, to the possibility that there are still places or forces in the world that defy easy explanation. The triangle taps right into that.
Some answers only raise more questions. Until then, stay curious.